Former Poet Laureate of Vermont, 2015 to 19, Chard deNiord is the author of 9 books of poetry, most recently Westminster West, 2025. Poet, essayist, and translator Rachel Hadas' new collection, Pastorals, was published this year, and My Cloak is Poetry is due out next year. A reception will follow this event out by the front, and the authors will sell and autograph their books. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Linnell. It's a great pleasure to be here in this wonderful treasure house of a building, reading with Chard deNiord, whom I greatly admire as a poet and I cherish as a friend. Thanks for coming in from the sunny afternoon. The reason we're both standing here together, and then one of us will sit down for a while, is we are going to begin with a poem by the Polish poet Czesław Miłosz, who died in 2004, was a Nobel laureate. And this poem, I believe, was written in 1968, but it has a perennial relevance in hard times. We're here to enjoy poetry and realize how precious it is. I'm grateful for poetry every day, but there's no disputing that this is a tough time. So we're going to experimentally alternate lines in this not terribly long poem. We'll see how it goes. This is called Incantation, translated by Miłosz and Robert Pinsky. Human reason is beautiful and invincible.
No bars, no barbed wire, no pulping of books.
No sentence of banishment can prevail against it.
It establishes the universal ideas in language
and guides our hand so that we write truth and justice
with capital letters, lie and oppression with small.
It puts what should be above things as they are.
It is an enemy of despair and a friend of hope.
It does not know Jew from Greek or slave from master,
giving us the estate of the world to manage.
It saves austere and transparent phrases
from the filthy discord of tortured words.
It says that everything is new under the sun.
Opens the congealed fist of the past.
Beautiful and very young are philosophia
and poetry, her ally in the service of the good.
As late as yesterday, nature celebrated their birth.
The news was brought to the mountains by a unicorn and an echo.
Their friendship will be glorious. Their time has no limit.
Their enemies have delivered themselves to destruction.
Thank you, Miłosz. And Robert Pinsky has said he plans to read this poem before any reading that he gives. It's always a good idea to read poems by other people. Do you want to say any more about Miłosz?
No. I had the privilege of interviewing Robert Hass for many hours several months ago, who was also a co-translator of Miłosz. And he talked about him as almost a father figure in poetry, and told this heroic story about him emigrating from Poland during, of course, the Nazi invasion there, and escaping to England, and then finally to New York, where he found a home in America as his new home, and then ended up in Berkeley, where he taught with Robert Hass for many years. And that's where Robert Hass and Robert Pinsky translated almost all of his work there, that led to his winning the Nobel Prize. So I just felt enormously privileged to sit and just at his feet and listen to him talk about Miłosz, his teacher, his mentor, his colleague there at Berkeley.
So I'm going to read a little bit and then Chard, and then we'll repeat that process.
Yeah,
Okay?
that
All right.
sounds good.
Good.
let me get my...
Chard is also a master interviewer. It's not easy to interview poets unless you really know their work, and he manages to do that. So, I'm going to read 4 prose pieces, none long, from Pastorals, which came out this past April. I'm not a big fan of what's called prose poetry, but I suppose these are prose poems. They came out of poems I've written here in Vermont over the years, and when I looked at these, I thought they have a strong family resemblance. They're not very formally tight, which I like my poems to be in general. They need a little bit of tweaking and wringing out, and this is what came out. So I'm just choosing 4 of them. The Old House. The old house, a Pandora's box of needs. She glanced up from her book and met my eyes. We smiled and shook our heads. I come to life, she says, when you are here. Year after year, a lingering last look and a promise. Live in me, animate me, keep me warm. Who but you can fill my empty spaces? Starting slowly, speeding up, days cluster and accumulate. The house, is it a big kaleidoscope, an anchor, or a threadbare procession of passing pilgrims whose hope of a mild interlude in a green zone yields to the need to wake and dress and leave once they have put their city faces on? In secondhand prose, St. Johnsbury's secondhand bookstore, where I buy too many poetry anthologies each year, I found and have since lost a poem by John Ashbery that contains the line, "Silence already filled with noise." I can't think of a better description of these summers, or wait, noise already filled with silence works just as well. Benign silences of people's individual lives, the rhythms of different days, the interlude here. No master list exists of all the guests who come over the years, but their friendly phantoms hang around. When Alicia Stallings, exhausted between the end of one writers' conference and the beginning of another, visited in 2019, the whooshing of the dryer in the room behind the bedroom where she was resting and the buzzing of bees audible on the porch outside combined to lull her into the first nap she'd taken in years. Outside the room, life went on. None of the doors in the house shuts tight, a feature it shares with our also old New York apartment. Life as background noise, dreams the foreground. The second piece of prose I'll read is called Walking Around the Triangle, Sermon in Stone. The triangle is sort of a 3 or 4 mile loop from our house on Pumpkin Hill down toward Water Andrick, which is a terrible thread of itself this summer, and then back and uphill. And I have the privilege of quoting Chard in this piece, which is one reason I'm reading it. The fern, the moss, the shadow, and the stone. The shadow of the fern on a stone, green with moss, stopped me. So begin again. Stone, moss, bright green, velvet soft, fern, shadow, sun. A violet by a mossy stone. Not quite, but the dappled foliage of the memory not far either. Ground beneath my feet. Sermons in stones and good in everything. That's the line that the exiled Duke says in As You Like It. He says, I like being in the woods. In this stone, I find a rock to sit on, and I gaze. An hour is a year, the poet Chard deNiord said yesterday. He also said, today's tomorrow, lesson daily, hourly learned. Afternoon is nothing but itself. In the afternoon, they came unto a land in which it seemed always afternoon. That's Tennyson. It was afternoon when Jane Hirshfield read from her poems upstairs in the St. Johnsbury Athenaeum. To be almost blinded by the westering sun slanting through the tall windows behind Jane felt exalted, hushed and saturated as stained glass. The reading happened to take place upstairs only because the gallery downstairs was undergoing some sort of renovation to nudge it forward from 1873. But downstairs we wouldn't have been able to see that shaft of sun. Hard to make out behind that stand of pine trees, the westering sun here imprints a perfect shadow of fern on stone. Time yields to space if you obey the call and find a log and sit, and no more verbs. Stone, moss, fern, shadow, sun, the fern's facsimile in the shadow shape slowed, then stopped me. Where had I been going? Around the triangle, as we used to call it, a loop around 3 roads, one less a road these past 10 years than a track, because it was grassy and wanted wear, Robert Frost, ever since Hurricane Irene swept through and washed that part of Brook Road out. The road crew never fixed it, and maybe never will. With minor detours, it's still walkable, but the town of Danville has put concrete barriers at either end of the road. Class 4 road, proceed at your own risk, or words to that effect. I looped back toward home. Home, away, home, the story. The way up and the way down are one and the same. There would still remain the never-resting mind, parsing the shadow of a fern on stone. And this is a really short one called September Sun. The sun, a blade slicing across the hill. A pool in which the cat basks on a tabletop, a slat of brightness further fading the faded quilt, a smear, a spill, a veil. Honey drizzled over the afternoon, drape slowly mantling a slope of green. Blackberries ripen, apples hang, fall. The sun, a blade, you want to graze your skin. And this is something I always feel at this time of year, and I'm sure I am not alone. It's called storing the season. The problem is the prodigality, apples and blackberries in profusion, both fruits by their respective natures hard to reach. Tangle of brambles, berries glossy black. Even to graze them with a fingertip, you have to stretch over a jungle of thorny vines and balance on a rotting log. Rosy apples cluster like the bride in Sappho at the top of a branch too high to reach. Too much. Go for what can be eaten. Bury a bucketful and cook into jam, or apples, slice, boil, strain into warm sauce. Inhale the rising steam. Fragrant distillation of and at the end of summer. The summer offers other harvests too, less tangible, harder to preserve. What to do with misty mornings burning off to blue, with spangled spider webs that delicately stitch 2 blades of grass together? You can't consume a sight. Or what about that lichened rock on which I used to perch and gaze out at the lines of drying hay striping the field? Is it possible to take all these away with me, to pack and then unpack them, spread them out like presents on a bed? Gifts? For whom? For everyone. And the occasion? No occasion. The rending gold of summer ending. I can only try to fold it into poetry. And now Chard. Thank you.
Oh, it's a great pleasure to read with Rachel. I've heard each other read often, but it's just never actually read together, so this is a real privilege and honor. I'm going to start with a kind of a credo that I wrote quite a while ago. I didn't realize it was a credo when I wrote it, but I was lying asleep in bed and the door kept banging, and this was out in Iowa actually, and I decided it was trying to tell me something in that Iowa wind, and then the poem became oddly a kind of credo for me way back then. On stormy nights he thinks of the wind and door as lovers destroying each other. He has meant to plane an edge for months so it will close, but he feels he would miss the sound of it banging against its hinge, then remaining open in the silence like a sail, propelling the house beyond the town to wild events in open fields. It's It's as if it falls when it closes, returning in a lull to its jam. He's happy this way in the interim, falling asleep each night in exactly the same way. If the door breaks, he'll buy another, or better yet, fix it. He will take perfect measurements of its width and length and examine its damage of splinters with gentle hands. He will mold it back into shape, then wait for the heat of summer to expand it again, until the door blows off on a sleepless night. He'll take advantage of conditions. That's the same as writing poetry. Didn't know it at the time. This is another poem from this book called Sleep in the Fire. First book. The quiet I keep on the thin path to the beach is the hardest. The sound of your talk below and the waves unrolling against the shore of broken stones is an oracle, my future now, of loving you. I'm caught beneath the tilt of maples and cry of difference between 10,000 things, leaf and stone, rail and wave, me, you. I feel old in this descent, naming blossoms along the trail, hyacinth, lilac, and roses. I feel a table has been righted in my heart, and I'm ready now to place a vase at its center with a single flower. I live down in southern Vermont, as I guess a lot of you know, in Westminster West, but our mailing address is Putney, which is hard. You know, you live in Westminster West, but everybody thinks you live in Putney. Yeah, close enough. We have this old farmer, he's 93 years old, who's our neighbor, Ed Temple, who mows his meadow at night. And anyway, this poem is, he's a kind of a shaman, you know, but this poem is actually called Shaman. I have another poem about him mowing at night, but maybe I'll read that later. Anyway, Shaman. All day the young obsidian crows cried out and back beneath the pines, their coarse, monotonous song, so urgent and repetitious, so apparently plausible to themselves, so intelligent. It wasn't funny. They have no teachers per se, these masters of comedy, these worldly martyrs. I took a drug from the air to change myself. I forgot every word I knew to speak their language. I saw the earth from above, which was a beginning. I felt the breeze beneath my arms, no longer arms, retracted my legs like vestiges of human form. I felt the deft excrescence of feathers around my body like angel clothes. And then what was left, an attitude derived from hunger, a savvy look. I imagined not imagining to keep this form. I opened my mouth to speak on the edge of town, in the crow-ridden suburbs, a sudden bird in love with glitter, a man without a mind who sang. I've become. So I'm just working through some of these books. It's, shocking a little bit to read these older ones, but they're helpful to saying, just to remember what I was thinking 100 years ago. What the animals teach us. Do you ever wonder about that? What the animals teach us? So one day I just went out in the yard and I said, okay, I'm going to try and write down a few things that the deer teaches me, or my dog teaches me, or the squirrel teaches me, or the cricket teaches me. And I came up with this, that love is dependent on memory, that life is eternal and therefore criminal, that thought is an invisible veil that covers our eyes, that death is only another animal, that beauty is formed by desperation, that sex is solely a human problem, that pets are wild in heaven, that sounds and smells escape us, that there are bones in the earth without any markers, that language refers to too many things, that the circle is loaded, that music hints at what we heard before we sang, that nothing we know by forgetting is sacred, that humor charges the smallest things, that the gods are animals without their masks, that stones tell secrets to the wildest creatures, that nature is an idea and not a place, that our bodies have diminished in size and strength, that our faces are terrible, that our eyes are doubled when gazed upon, that snakes do talk as well as asses, that we compose our only audience, that we are geniuses when we wish to kill, that we are naked despite our clothes, that our minds are bodies in another world. So one more, and then I'm going to let Rachel return. Let's see. So, do you all know the poetry of Ruth Stone at all? I had the great privilege and honor of getting to know her at the end of my life. I used to drive up from Providence College every week, in about 5 hours, just to sit at her bedside for hours and listen to her while she drank this disgusting soda. I can't remember what it was, but that was Ruth. There should be a word like Minch for women, don't you think? Is there such a word? Anyway, that's what she was. Anyway, she was such a godsend to me. And so I said to her before she died, I said, "What's your last wish, Ruth?" And she said, "I want you to turn my house into an artist colony, you and Bianca." And I said, "We'll do it." And Bianca's taken more of an active role in that than I have, but we did all the legal work and we got it up and running. So I feel like, feel good about that. Getting Ruth up. For 5 months, I tried to get Ruth out of bed, to sit in her chair, then maybe stand for a while. "No," she said, "I don't have the strength anymore in my legs, and besides, I'm blind." But I had read her poems, and I knew how truthful she was as a liar, and so continued to urge her to rise like the paralytic from his pallet and walk, at least sit up and move around before her muscles quit. And then one day her granddaughter Nora, the milliner, came in and asked her to try on one of her hats, a 1940s felt classic with a feather, and wear it, as she once did a similar hat 60 years ago when Walter, her husband, was still alive. And she did, taking her time to swing her legs like arms onto the floor and stand, then walk again, as if she could see just where to pose in the parlor and smile for the camera until she could smile no longer and walk back in her bright, dark room and slept. Rachel, I think you might want to come up now, again, before I go on.
Thank you. That's great.
Okay.
What is the name of the wonderful documentary that you made about Ruth?
It's called The Vast Library of the Female Mind. And it's shown all over the country. You can get it on TV if you want to see it. Nora Jacobson did it, the great filmmaker in Vermont. The Vast Library of the Female Mind.
It's wonderful.
From one of her poems. So,
Yeah. Before I forget, I wanted to invite every single person here to a reception after the reception here, downhill at the Wandering Vine on Railroad Street. There should be very good food, and if there's not quite enough food, there will be good company. So it's almost next door to Moose River Lake and Lodge, a couple of doors up, so please do come. The ancient Greeks had a paradox, a logical problem, which is interesting to think about. Not exactly logic, but they called it the ship of Theseus. Theseus, the Athenian hero. And apparently the Athenians would say, this is the ship Theseus sailed in 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 600 years ago. Well, every board in the ship has been replaced, and we have a new sail, and we have new oars, and we have new rowers, but it's still the same ship. And the question is, how true is that? And we're in a building that's been renovated. We're in a town that keeps changing. We are in bodies that keep changing every 7 years. And this is a little villanelle called The Ship of Theseus. And I apologize if too much of what I'm reading is about the house where we're lucky to have to spend in the summers, but it's not just, no poem is only about one thing. We all are and are living in the ship of Theseus. And right now we can wonder if the American government is the same. It might have the same name, but maybe everything in it has been changed. I love the form of villanelles because you get to repeat yourself a lot and lazily use the same line over and over. When I was younger, I could write a sonnet just like that, and now I find I need to recycle, so I write villanelles more. The ship of Theseus, it's called the summer house. The ship of Theseus, this house is creaking on its old foundations, tethered to time's parenthesis. The process always works like this. Site of 7 decades habitation, the house, our ship of Theseus, assailed by blizzards, lightning, mice, and losses and accumulations, offers a parenthesis, respite from Scylla and Charybdis. Wear and tear and renovations transform it, but this seasoned house, defying metamorphosis, hosts successive generations nestled in its parenthesis. Nothing can stay the way it was. All works in progress need revision. This house, our ship of Theseus, abides in time's parentheses. And this is also speaking to Chard's poem about, writing a poem is like some kind of construction, or what was I thinking 100 years ago? But am I the same person that I was? Poetry is one way to try to stop time in a weird way. I'm a retired English teacher, so this is both a poem about teaching and a dream poem and an anxiety dream poem. I'm sure people can relate, and I'm sure there are other retired teachers here, and maybe not retired. It's called As If for Life. A familiar long red table. I was preparing a meal for hungry children, chopping away at a bowl full of raw onions that made my eyes water. Would there be enough for everyone? Standing in front of a sparsely attended class, underprepared as usual, I decided to ask them to do some in-class writing, but then immediately changed my mind. I'd tell them about the children at the table. I know, to narrate any dream risks being boring or obscure or both. Nevertheless, I went ahead and told them about the pungent onions, the red table, the waiting children. Write about that. Their medical memoirs, the capstone of the course, were due next week. It was mid-December. We'd reached the end of our allotted time, but I didn't have the heart to remind my students, now hunched over, writing as if for life. Those capstone projects are still overdue, and it no longer matters. It never mattered. I hope my guests will have enough to eat. The end of the year, a dream within a dream, a time to pause, then try to go on giving. And 2 more poems. We had lunch with a friend who was here yesterday at Joe's Pond, a very benign pond which is almost big enough to be a lake, I'm told. But this is a poem more about Lake Memphremagog and those bigger, more scary lakes. It's called cryptozoology, a word that my friend Lisa mentioned casually. I didn't even know that word until recently. And it has an epigraph from King Lear, which is a poem about tough times. I'm sure a play about tough times. And one of the more benign characters, horrified by the cruelty he sees, says this: "If that the heavens do not their visible spirits send quickly down to tame these vile offenses, it will come. Humanity must perforce prey on itself, like monsters of the deep." Last summer's floods, and floods the year before, carved out deep trenches, each with its raw scar. Floods happen swiftly and leave wrecks behind. Drought proceeds slowly, drying out the land. Dust coats zucchini, and the beans look brittle. Pine needles crunch, leaves prematurely rattle. Parched as any overheated creature, I'm not alone in being drawn to water. Last week at Crystal Lake, a cloudless sky, shrieks of children frolicking nearby, mothers bounced babies, ducks swam in a line. True to its name, the lake was crystalline. What was that in the water, small and white? A condom. Then it floated out of sight. Its provenance a minor mystery, but it was on the surface, plain to see. I think about some other lakes up here, carved out by glaciers, narrow and austere, secretive and stern, forbidding old, unfathomably deep and icy cold, the rumored homes of something never known or knowable. Some things are too far down, hard to envision, ageless, multiform, surfacing to disappear again. Legends last and mysteries endure. Indians warned settlers, don't go in there, centuries ago. There's a society of Memphremagog dracontology, poised between urgent myth and murky body, cryptozoology's a blurry study. We want to learn, aspire to mastery. We aim to chart the oceans and the sky, to map the realm above, the world below. But there are some things we will never know. Blithe in our surface element up here, laughing, cavorting, also making war. We bask in light, we creatures of a day, but also we are one another's prey. Memphremagog, Willoughby, I take a sip of coffee. On my mug, a snake. Mug, courtesy of the Fairbanks Museum, but every time I see it has quite an aggressive rattlesnake right on the mug. And finally, before I hand you back to Chard, this is a new poem, possibly not finished, but unlike Chard, I'm reading mostly new work, but I'm still the ship of Theseus, right? And this is called The Last Week because we're leaving next week and it never gets any easier, which is another part of our temporary and permanent nature. We're constantly changing and giving things up and having to adjust, and it never seems to get a whole lot easier. That gold shaft through the window of the day is more than light. And the shed over in the meadow where you sit unpacking your past is more than a little house and also less. The shed is an idea fragrant with wood. It is a box containing time, where time gets sorted, some of it discarded, and some uncovered and rediscovered. You discard time, and time in turn will end by discarding you. Not end, it will go on. Time sifts through the hourglass of the last week here faster and faster. It spirals like water as it rushes down a drain. The apple tree, gnarled, gesturing, is a world that has dropped its fruit. The leaves of the maple falling every day allow more morning sun to shine through clearly. Since now my hair is thinner and my skin is dry, I would like to think that I'm becoming a better conduit for the shaft of sunlight, like a finger pointing or combing the thin foliage of the tree. A little rain has rinsed the dusty leaves by the side of the road, and they smell sweet as the rot begins. But dryness still drills deep into the earth. The limbs of the tree are brittle. They do not ponder lastness, do not worry about packing time into boxes. They dry out, break without warning, fall. The dreams that filled the house and crowd our nights are packed away. Who will unpack them? Maybe we are unknowingly unpacking what someone else some other time has stored. The apple tree is a world. The shed in the meadow is a box of time. Elegy flows like water from a spring and runs away and spirals as it runs. Thank you. And now Chard.
Thank you, Rachel. Wonderful poems. I was sitting here and thinking, Rachel mentioned I did a lot of interviews with a lot of Vermont poets, and one of the poets I interviewed around here was Galway Cannell, fairly soon before he passed away. And so I asked him some questions. He was so generous. And so I said to him, one last question. In the last poem of your book, Strong as Your Hold, a poem titled, Why Regret, you write, doesn't it outdo the pleasures of the brilliant concert to wake in the night and find ourselves holding hands in our sleep? End of quote. These are actually the last two lines of the poem that I'm quoting back to him. They make the valiant claim about what means most to you, not the brilliant concert or perhaps poem, also by implication, but waking in the middle of the night to find yourself holding hands with your beloved. And he kind of teared up and said, isn't it a valiant claim, or is it a wonderful, surprising realization? Isn't to find in a moment that we who chose years ago to live as a couple are still thrilled to be with each other? Isn't that about the most blessed thing of all? Yes, I said. So it was quite moving to hear him say that. So I'm going to move along to, now for something completely different. This is from a book called, the more you write, and I think Rachel might feel this way also, the more you realize that you, like Socrates, don't know a damn thing. So I just decided to call this book In My Unknowing. And it freed me up quite a bit. It made me more bold, for better or worse, And so I said, okay, I'm going to try to tackle a few subjects I've never really tackled before. And so I wrote a poem called Sex Is. The nail that only drives part way, that bends the trail of snakes across the earth. Sex is the lord of void inside the clay. that turns to flesh from breath in a single day. Sex is the salve we rub into the hurt, the sweet, addictive sweat that smells like hay. Sex is the knife we use in the dark to betray our love for nothing, cut out its heart. Sex is the fire that burns all day and into the night, the prayer too easy to say. Sex is the wanted God who hides in the dirt, the master spy behind the lines, the gray, then bleeding sky on the eighth impossible day, on which we were aroused by shame to flirt. Sex is the evening wear we wear all day. That tight reptilian suit that smells like hay. Villanelle. Rachel's inspired me with form quite often. This is an elegy for my mother. We were sitting under a tree up here near Burlington, actually. She'd passed away fairly recently. And this tree was just buzzing with bees. It was spring, and they were just foraging for sugar in the tree. And so this is one of those poems that just writes itself pretty quickly. So that's kind of a gift. When you are thinking of someone, you know, there's that great passage in Gilgamesh, when you're grieving, all that is left to one who grieves is convalescence. No change of heart or spiritual conversion, for the heart has changed, and the spirit has converted to a thing that sees how much it costs to lose someone it loved. This side of you, words are poor receipts for what time hath taken away. Anybody know where that's from? That's John Clare, the great English poet. I think you're still here sometimes, calling to me like the thrush at dusk inside the woods where I lose my way. I search for you like a ghost myself, in all the usual places, stand on the shore this side of you, and speak to the river that flows and stays and flows. Everything is deaf to what I say, choosing only to speak in the single tongue of its simple language: river, sycamore, wind. I listen to the hills and valleys with the hope that even a breeze will cure my heart. Move on, it whispers, in the honey locust abuzz with bees. Move on. A few leaves fall like empty pages. I carry your stone with a perfect ear for silence. Let's see, I'll read one more from this new short book. This is called One is Other. That idea of the transpersonal self has always besotted me as a muse. This is about burying a beloved dog. I put my dog to rest in the meadow. The silence was a sounding board for all his barks and howls. Master, the master said, I'll take him now in the field as he runs to me. Hearing my voice is yours, which it is. It is.
Signing books, and there's some food here, and there will be more food down the hill, as I said. And I'm sure we're both happy to also answer questions, but in my experience, it's easier to answer a question over a glass of wine rather than standing there. No. But if you want to take if anyone has questions, I don't know what's the question. Yeah, if anyone has a question, I'm very happy to try to answer it. I don't see a lot of raised hands. Everybody here understands everything we've said.
I don't. As Rachel said, we'll be happy to talk to you, but if anybody has a question.
Do you have a question for us?
A question for you. Maybe, do you have a question?
I have to think about that one, Sean.
Just I have a quick question. I lived out in Florida, Vermont, and I know people look down on us because we're not in the mountains, but there are hills down there, like Putney Mountain. Do you folks have a lot of readings here? And is this a kind of a mecca for readings? Yeah.
There have been many poets passing through here.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have a question, but I just want to say how much I appreciate both of you here in St. Johnsbury, in Vermont, reading wonderful poetry.
Oh, great.
It's, we're not in New York City, we're not in the larger, and it's wonderful to be in a rural spot where we could be in this space and read with poetry.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you, Darrell.
But, that sort of prompts me to remind everybody that Vermont has perhaps one of the very richest traditions of poetry in the entire country. We go back to Robert Frost, of course, and then we have Louise Gluck, who won the Nobel Prize, right? We have Galway Canal. I mean, there are very few other states that have as rich a tradition in Vermont. So I think there's something in the water here.
There's more room for poetry because it's a little quieter.
Yeah.
And there's huge inspiration. I mean, Robert Frost, Leland Kinsey, Galway Canal have all written poems about picking berries.
Well, Hayden Carruth is from Vermont. Come on, we got to say Hayden Carruth. Come on.
Ruth Stone.
Ruth Stone. I mean, these are all Pulitzer Prize winners, Nobel Prize winners. There's no other place like Vermont. So don't think you guys are in the minority here.
And also, just because people aren't necessarily huge readers or writers of poetry doesn't mean Vermonters don't appreciate beauty. And one of our neighbors said the other day, "It's so dry that I can't hear anything growing." Wow, that was so beautiful. And he also referred to a nervous child as coming unglued. I'm going to stick with that one. I mean, Vermonters know how to use language. History moves on and kick that over. So,
yeah. No, I know. It's something. And Brian Wade, I left out. Yeah.
I have a question. Of the poets you mentioned, how many are native-born Vermonters? How many are not? And does it make a difference?
Most of them have migrated here.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a native.
Leland Kinsey.
Leland Kinsey. Yes, thank you, Ray.
and maybe Garrett Keyser, I don't know. Robert Frost was born in San Francisco, but he became very Vermont.
Yeah.
He lived in Concord.
Oh,
He lived in Concord, Vermont.
right. Well, he lived in a lot of places.
He did.
Franconia, Ripton. He has a poem called New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And the last line is, "At present, I'm living in Vermont." Really great.
Yeah, he loved real estate. He lived in Bennington, he lived all over.
I had the privilege of meeting Robert Frost in 1958. I was 10, and my father was teaching at the Bedloe School of English, not the Writers' Congress, the English school. And Frost would come to read, and everyone stood up the moment he came into the room. You don't see that every day anymore. And he was very, very friendly. I don't know how easy it was to get to know him. Donald Hall has written about Frost late in his life. He was very hard of hearing, so that was hard to communicate. But he was very interested in everybody who was interested in him.
Well,
And the poetry is so wise, and the prose that he wrote is so wise.
Yeah, he was a famous raconteur, obviously. He was as gifted as a storyteller as he was a poet, but he was ornery. He was like a real Vermonter in that way. So even though there are many poets like the ones I just mentioned who weren't born here, Vermont adopted them. They were all adopted here.
And some of them just stayed here and some of them came and went. Poets, that's what poets do.
Yeah,
Yeats has a line, they came like swallows and like swallows went.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
You know, when Louise Gluck won the Nobel Prize, that was a huge deal here, you know, it's just, she was kind of hermetic, you know, she was, but that was for us a little bit. Most poets are, they don't like to come out much.
But then we come out.
But then we come out. They like to read, but that's,
Well, I'm very grateful to the Athenaeum and to
Yeah.
all of you for coming.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.